Welcome to the It's Our Life's Work podcast, brought to you by Opus Vitae Construction here in Portland, Oregon.
So welcome to episode 2 of It's Our Life's Work podcast. We're here with Arlene Lord of Lord Design in Portland, Oregon, and we're going to have a conversation about design stuff.
Is that what you do?
Sometimes. It depends on the day.
Got it.
So, Arlene, this is conversation. Right?
Yes.
So we're just going to banter back and forth and kind of have fun. But I did have a specific question for you. And the role of an interior designer, like told to somebody that imagine like it's, a 5-year-old child and they have no clue, right? Because I think that oftentimes we're in this all day, all the time. Mm-hmm. And we think that people know like what an interior designer does. Mm-hmm. And it's always surprising to me, like even people within my own family, they just don't know. They, just because they're not in it all the time.
Right.
And so I think it might be good to start off with, a bit about what an interior designer really is.
Wow. How much time do we have?
An hour.
We have 2
We have an hour. Yeah.
An hour.
Exactly.
Okay, so you get one question out of this whole thing.
Yeah. Right.
So what is an interior designer? I think that when
Spicy.
Spicy's
one.
Yeah. You have to have a
good
good
interior
sense
designer.
of humor.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Or you'll go crazy. Interior design is really complicated. You guys know this.
We do know that.
And I think the thing that people don't understand is how multifaceted it is and how many layers go into it and how many humans are involved in it.
So it's like a 7-layer dip.
Oh, it's like a 14-layer dip. Yeah. And that's
It's so deep you lose your finger in it.
yeah, it kind of sounds yummy, doesn't it? I like it. We need a really big potato chip. But it's so much more about people. It's so much more about the psychology of people. It's sales. It's business management. It's marketing. It's networking. And then, and then you get to design every once in a while, client management, client relations. It's all of these things. The design is actually only about 10% of what we do. If you're running the business, if you're a designer working for a designer, then you get to design. But as a business owner, it's all of the other stuff, and then you get to design. So, but interior design is about making people feel at home. That's the way I look at it.
Okay.
Is that I've spent my life like observing people and seeing how things don't work. I just did it at a friend's house recently. They came home from a walk and I was rearranging their furniture.
That's fun.
Couldn't take it because there was no place to set your drink. There was an awkwardness in sitting there. If I could have remodeled their kitchen, I would have. But
Why don't we?
What?
Why don't we?
Because he's not going to be there long enough. It's not worth it. Right. But it's making people feel at home. I want people. That's the way I feel when people come to my own home. Is I want them to stay and feel comfortable and feel nurtured and want to be there. And I want that for people with their own homes. And so, but to get there, it's a pretty winding path.
Yeah, it's
lined
really
with people like you
interesting
guys.
that you bring it up in the way that you did, because one of the things we talked about and then even went back and reflected on during the first episode was that Kevin said ours is like a 30% construction, 70% people kind of a thing. And then we spent most of our time talking about people, and then we hadn't even talked about construction about most of the way through.
Yeah.
And you're saying the same thing right out of the gate, that it's 10% design and it's 90% other things. That's just such a fascinating dynamic, I think. If I were to think I need my house renovated in some way, I'm going to call interior designer. That's certainly not what I would be thinking.
Right.
I would be thinking they're here for the rearrangement of or beautification of my space or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it starts there.
Yep.
It's like you start there and then you have to back all the way up to get to lay the groundwork to get to that goal. And that I think those steps in between, that glazing over of that is what you see on social media and TV and stuff, is just like, oh, we have a problem. Ta-da, it's done in 2 weeks for $2,000. And it's just not reflective of what we do, as you know. So
Yeah, I mean, like experience has been that the design process can take quite a long time.
Yeah. And it really should.
That's what I was going to
Yeah,
say is
yeah.
that it should.
Yeah.
Because it's a big deal, right? And you don't want to rush through it.
Mm-mm.
You want to go slow and get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I have learned through the years is that what I start off thinking I like, by the time you get through the process, might be very different,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
And if you don't give yourself that time for that process to evolve, you may end up with a whole lot of the thing that you actually really don't like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. It's kind of like sometimes when we get remodel clients and or they're about ready to move into a house, they just bought it and they want
Yeah.
to remodel it. It's best to give them the advice of just wait for a little bit. Learn that house.
Live in the house.
See where you gravitate to. See what really frustrates you about the house.
Right.
Find out where the light is and where the light isn't, and where the function is and where the function isn't.
Right.
And then we can tackle it, because going in and not knowing and then hurrying through that just so that you can live in the house will probably mean that you're going to redoing something.
Yeah. Or end up living with something that you don't like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We want people to stay in their houses for a really long time.
We do.
Yeah.
That's like the most sustainable model.
Well, 100%. 100%.
If I were a potential client coming to you and you were just talking candidly to me about what to expect in the experience, after all the years of doing what you've done, what are the parts of the design process that you find that just bog down?
I think it's the waiting.
Yeah.
I think that people, when they engage with an interior designer, they're already excited. Excuse me. And so they don't understand the length of time it takes to get to things, as we were talking about. It takes time.
Right.
And so I think that's where it is like we meet with them, we do the questionnaires, we get to know them, we measure their space, photograph their space, chat with them about their projects. You guys are involved. And then we kind of go back and take all of that data and create the concept. And that could be several weeks, depending on what the project is. And then they see the concept and they're very, very excited. But then we need to lay the groundwork to make that happen. And that takes a long time. So I think the biggest thing is, managing the expectations around this beautiful thing that's been designed and the amount of time and work it takes to get to it. I think that's the biggest issue. Consistently.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that people are in a hurry, right? It's
Oh, yeah.
exciting for them and stuff,
sure.
and they just want to get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like, you're having a 7-course meal and you see dessert over here, and you're just like, I just want to get to the dessert. Like, who
Yeah.
cares about this other stuff? But the other stuff really does matter
Yeah. Yeah.
for your overall health, right? So the
Well,
overall health
there's
of the project.
and there's so many details that people glaze over that they don't think that we think about. Like, if we're designing something, we're like, well, we're going to have to make sure that Opus knows about that, because they're going to need to work that into their timeline. And that's something that we're doing as we're designing. That could be even about hanging a mirror and where that mirror goes. It's not even an intricate cabinetry detail or anything, but those things matter, because
Right.
at the end, if somebody hadn't thought of it, you'd be like, well, Arlene, there's tile there, and that's going to be a bummer. So those are the things that add time, but ultimately end up in a really successful project.
I've been reading a book right now by Brené Brown that's about emotions.
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful in its own right. But one of the things that she talks about in there is how important language is to describe our experience and to have the right words for the language that we're using. One of the things that I've come across, I think more than just about anything when it comes to your profession, is misuse of or misunderstanding of the words interior designer, interior decorator, and thinking that those are all the same thing. Is that true or not? Like, tell me about that.
That is true, and it's kind of regional too.
Yeah.
On the East Coast, decorators are designers, and there's no confusion around that. On the West Coast, it's very different, and the way we think of it out here is that interior designers can do what decorators do, but decorators can't do what interior designers do. We can design the structure, we can do the kitchens, the baths, the whole house, the planning, as well as layering in the finishing touches. Whereas decorators work with the architecture that's already been finished out. Maybe they can specify or want to specify products or materials and finishes, but typically they're doing what's at the very end. We do from the very, very beginning and what happens at the end and all the stuff in between.
So you spoke about the West Coast and the East Coast. What happens in the middle?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know.
Never.
It's very confusing. Yeah. It's just a big cornucopia.
But we're on the West Coast, so you don't need to know what's happening there.
Yeah,
at the moment.
exactly. Yeah, but there's weirdness around decorating and interior design, and to me, it's all important. It's just what you want to do, and how you explain it to your client. You know, yeah, we do decorating. That's one aspect of the package of things that we do. We're not just decorators. We are interior designers that also decorate.
Nice. That's helpful.
It is for sure. Now, here is the $1 million question.
Oh boy.
Can AI replace you?
Nope. That's
That was easy.
That's a no. Well, I think AI is super helpful. I don't think anybody should be afraid of it, but I don't. With what we do is so high touch. The layer of people that we work with and the kind of work that we do cannot be reproduced by a robot, let's just say, or by AI, because there has to be a human involved there, because we're dealing with humans. So that AI can't lay out the fabric for you, can't think of all those conversations that you had even in passing about, you know, how you feel about tweed. You know what I mean? There's like, or I hate tile for these. They don't have all of that. They can make things beautiful. They can operate systems. They can make our lives easier, but they can't replace the human touch. And what we do is too personal, you know, so I'm not afraid of it. I think it's a cool tool, but it will not replace us. And we're creative. It's up here. So.
It's interesting too. We've in some of the biological building line of things that we're going down, for example, there's a fair amount of nuance to it. Like when you walk into a room that has plaster on the walls, for example, there's multi-varied colors, and our body responds in certain ways to the variety of those colors versus a latex wall of green, or that sort of thing. And there's a very subjective experience-based thing about not only how we experience a space, but also the way you can interact with a particular homeowner to see their reaction when you show them something. That is, you're watching their body language and their cues in a different way than I imagine any AI could possibly do, that may cause you to go a different direction, I would think.
Right. And AI can't be out shopping and, you know, come across something while I'm antiquing in another state, and I see something that makes me think of that client that I know will be perfect for them. And we can layer that in and make that house have that bit of soul, or see an idea someplace and we work that into the bathroom design, you know, how to make a really cool shower entrance or something. Those things are deeply personal, and I just don't see that being translated in AI.
You know, one of our policies is that we don't take on a project that doesn't have an interior designer or an architect.
Yay. Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
We don't do it. And sometimes, you know, people will call us or we'll talk to folks or whatever, and they're like, yeah, you know, we weren't planning on using an architect or an interior designer because, you know, we know what we want, and like we don't understand why they need to be there. And then we have this kind of uphill battle of trying to explain to them. Typically they self-select out of working with us because they don't see the value in what designers and architects bring to the table on in their mind, a simple project.
Right.
And I think to a lot of homeowners out there, they see simplicity in something and don't understand it's actually very complex because they just don't know. And so my question is really like, what would you say to that person that's like, yeah, I don't really think I need a designer for my bathroom. You know, I pretty much know what I want.
Well, that's really, it's difficult because you don't want to make people feel, you don't want to belittle them or make them feel bad. But I guess I would start by just asking questions about, so then what do you have in mind? What are you thinking about doing? And then just ticking off the things that we know. Oh, well, you know that if you move that toilet, that's going to be one of the most expensive moves, and I'm not sure that that's going to fit really well for your needs, because you're going to need at least a minimum of 30 inches from here. You know, you start having that conversation, and then have you thought about that? That window's in an odd place, and you shouldn't have a wood window in your shower, and have those kind of conversations, and then it starts to dawn on them that this goes deeper then it's infinitely more complicated than they realize. So it's just by having a clarifying conversation. I am not in the business of convincing. If you don't want to work with me, I get it. That's fine. That's better. I don't want you to force yourself to work with me, but I do feel like it's kind of a duty to explain to people the depth and breadth of what it is that we do, so that at least I've given them some information to go forward and make their mistake or not, but they've at least heard from a professional that it's not that easy, not all that's golden is golden.
Yeah, that's right.
No, it could be plated.
It
Could
could
be
be
plated
very
too.
well. It could be
Right.
brass.
Exactly.
Really. Yeah.
Right. It could be.
Yeah.
But the thing that is always sort of striking to me is I think that, with like the HGTV revolution,
Yeah.
and I mean, they're entertaining.
For sure. I watched some of them.
And it's just like professional wrestling to me. It's entertaining, right? But it's not real.
Yeah.
And-
Yes.
But some people don't know that, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you come from another country and even like understand, and you've seen this thing. You're like, oh my gosh, how can these guys beat each other up like that? And then like walk away like nothing ever happened, because they don't realize that it's not real. And I think that's the same thing that's happening with the whole HGTV revolution. Is that people don't realize that it's a scripted fake thing.
Right.
They see it, they hear them talk about money, and they're like, oh well, that's what it should cost.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. And when we say, well, it doesn't cost that, it costs a whole lot more, oftentimes we're then looked at as trying to rip them off or make a bunch of money on them, and that they take like the HGTV information as being like the thing that they're comparing what we're telling them against. And I think that that's done a lot of harm to our industry in a lot of ways.
Oh, for sure.
Some ways it's been good in the sense that people are excited about renovating and building and stuff, and they know more about products and to ask for certain things and stuff. But the other ugly downside to it is that it's really made our industry seem different than it really is.
Yeah, and I don't like the adversarial. There seems to be like the designer and the contractor,
Yeah,
and
of course.
and that there's always that little drama that's built in. And as you well know, we try to avoid drama at all costs. So, and there's nothing adversarial about it, and that the very best projects are the ones where everybody's in unison and we're working as a team for the client, and the client's on the team too, and it's all tick 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 because we're all taking care of each other.
Right.
And that comes at a cost. I mean, expensive things are expensive, and if you want it to be done right and be a forever home or a beautiful investment or just to have a really high quality of life in this investment that you've made, then that comes through the work of professionals, and those professionals command a certain dollar amount due to their experience and the product that they're producing for you.
Yeah, what may not be apparent to folks out there who are hiring a design professional is that you put in a lot of time, and we put in a lot of time also in the relationship building within the industry to allow the project to go really well, which is not a given. Right? So you and Kevin meet regularly for lunch, and you and I will be meeting every quarter to talk about...
Oh, well, that's nice, huh?
Yeah.
See?
Wow.
He buys every time.
Oh, is that right?
saying.
Yeah,
The bar.
and she always gets extras.
We'll be meeting every 6 or 12
There will be
months.
pie. Yeah.
No, it's all coming out of the same place. As far as
Oh, all right. Well, I don't care about that.
But we'll be checking in with each other every quarter, so just to understand what the rhythms of each other's businesses are, so we can really mesh together well. And there's a whole lot of relational work that goes on behind the scenes for you to be able to take a client that you trust and say, here's the right contractor for you. So none of us are billing for that time, obviously. This is what we get to do behind the scenes, and it's actually probably the biggest joy of the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
the building of the relationships that make it all possible.
Yeah, no, Kevin and I were talking about that at lunch the other day, and we got on the subject of, we're always talking about how great it is to work with each other, because I just feel so lucky to have met you guys and to be in this partnership.
And likewise.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's no smoke. It's very true. But we were talking about that very same thing, and I was reflecting on the fact that it makes me a better designer. It makes Kim and I better designers, because we feel like we can do things that are unexpected because we have a team that will say, no, that's not possible.
Right.
Or, yeah, let's figure that out. So I feel like I can do some extra cool stuff, and that I have a team behind me that's like, yeah, let's make this happen. Or that we can critically analyze it ahead of time and say, can't do exactly that, but you can do this, and that will get that design intent across. And it's just so good. In the past, when I've worked with people that I didn't know or didn't trust, things were kept really tight, because you just, I'm going to do what I know, and because I don't want things to go off the rails, and that's not what's best.
Yeah.
That's not best for the client. It's not best for the creative process, the project itself. If you're distrustful of the people on your team, that's not good.
No, it's not. And I imagine too that if you have worry about the wobble of the potential construction, that you're not your best self and you're not focusing on the design, which is like what you do best. I mean, truly, right?
That's why I do it.
Right.
Yeah.
We do construction best. We don't do design.
Right.
I mean, I do sometimes.
Well, we need to talk about that. But anyway.
It's just a side hustle. Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, and when we were talking at lunch and you brought that point up to me, it's like, I didn't think about it that way. And it's like, wow, no, that's really a pretty important thing. And I think somewhat impactful to a project is that you're able to do your best work because you're not worried about the thing going on over here. And we're able to do our best work because we're not worried about the thing going on over here. And that's like perfect scenario.
Yeah.
It really is.
No, it is, because there is some stuff that you can't. I mean, we give very detailed plans, as you know, but there's still stuff that needs to be worked out on site.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if the trim's going to be exactly 3 3/4 away from,
Right.
on site it could scooch a bit because it works better that way for some unforeseen reason. And that when we can work in collaboration and get down to those details together and stand back and say, that's the way to do it, then it always is so much more beautiful, and on all levels.
Exactly. I have to tell a story, Arlene.
Yes.
God. Here we go.
No, it's a
Is
good.
it about base shoe?
It's not, but we'll circle back around to that.
Do I need Kleenex?
No, you don't, Paul.
Okay.
Well, maybe.
All right.
Maybe. No, so the story I had is when we were sitting at your office, and it was myself, I think James, our project manager, was there, and we were reviewing some project. I don't remember what project it was. But we were all sitting there doing our thing, and the phone rang, and you looked at it and saw the number on there, and it was some other contractor or whatever, and it brought anxiety to you.
Yeah.
And like Kim looks over and she sees, like, and you guys are exchanging glances back and forth, and after it's over, you said something to me like, I don't feel that way when I see you call.
It's totally true.
And I don't think about that, right? Like we just do what we do. But reflecting on that after the fact, it's like, wow, that would be really shitty if I was the source of the person that when you see that phone number come over your phone, you get anxious and you're like, oh my gosh, it's this guy or it's this
all
person.
the acid runs to your
Right,
stomach.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, what's wrong now? What's going to be the problem?
Yeah.
What's coming at me? And that's miserable. Right?
It really is.
It really is. And so I took from that experience, like, I want to do everything I can to be the opposite of that. And so when you call, I like to say how nice your hair looks that day or whatever, just to make the experience positive and fun, and hope that you do call all the time with questions, little questions, because we want to answer them and be that resource for you, as opposed to the feeling of, oh, I don't want to call those folks, or oh, they're too busy, they don't have time for me or whatever, because then things get lost or dropped or not followed up on, and I don't want that. I want it to be this just very fluid wonderfulness of communication back and forth.
Well, it is. You guys are awesome about that, and it's really, really helpful, because I've been doing this for 25 years, and
Really?
yeah, I know. I started when I was 17. And going through the gamut, I mean, learning all the lessons along the way, and feeling a lot of the time, especially as a independent designer, that you're alone in this. This is all you, and knowing that I have a team that I can call and flesh things out with, and what do you think, and is this, and then also knowing, it's like, if I have a question, can we that you guys answer it, and you don't think I'm stupid. You don't like have, eyes rolled about it, that you're like very attentive in the most supportive way. And that just means the world to me and to Kim, because Kim will be thinking out loud about things too. And I'm like, I don't know. We have to ask Kev. We have to ask, Paul, and see what we can do. And it's always so nice. It just, you don't feel like you're on an island.
So
Go ahead.
So what would you say the ratio is between you and Kim saying we need to ask Kev or we need to ask Paul?
I don't know. We just like roll the dice.
Kevin, you know the answer is you, because that's your part in the equation.
Oh, I didn't really think about it that way,
I know,
Paul.
I know.
Wow.
He likes to do this.
I know.
Yeah.
Of course it's you, Kevin.
Thanks for backing away from that one. Yeah, one of the things that I realized the other day, I was reflecting on, it was maybe 10 years ago, and I was in another firm, and I was thinking about the difficult relationship often between design and contractors. You referenced that a little bit ago. And I stood there at that moment thinking, what is it that I can do or we can do to help break that down? As we've gotten along in relationship, Kevin and I together, and got enough of the process elements from our side sorted out that we don't have to be constantly dealing with the chaos that Kevin was talking about during our last episode, we're able to put our heads together and think about that really strategically. Like, how do we do this better? And one of the attributes that I would say that was an experience that was common was that you in your design world would be on your own, like you said, and then you would get to the end of your design, and then you or the client would invite a contractor to come and sort of peer over your shoulder and look at these things. And there would often be a lot of eye rolling and other things because that's really difficult or this or that. We, together with you and others, are working to sort of break down that way of thinking about things. Would you describe what your experience is when you're in your design and how we would relate to you in that process?
What do you mean?
Like in terms of before a contract is signed by us with the client, for example, the period where you're doing design and we are sort of along for the ride, when you would be calling, yes, Kevin, not me, right?
Yeah. Well, we had an example of that for the Helms bonus room that we did, and it was like we were in design and we were thinking we needed, a few more inches it would be better for the sofa to sit back so we could do this thing, and is it possible? Can we move that wall? And we knew to ask you, and you actually went over and checked on it all, or maybe you had already been there, so you just knew. You're like, no, that's totally fine because of these reasons, and that just made us move forward faster because we had the authority or the confirmation that you can do that, go for it. And even if it wasn't easy, you would have come up with a way like, well, what are you thinking? And let's see how we can work around this. So it made us move faster with the design, which is better for the client. We bill hourly. And also we felt confident with going forward with all the stuff that we were doing. So things just fall into place. Yeah. And that's just a really helpful element to know that you have somebody on your team that can answer that question for you, or meet you on site. Say, we did something that we didn't tell you about. Let's go over there and look at it together with the plan at this stage and see what you think. And that's been helpful too.
And as you're starting, like, you've done all your inventories on the client to figure out what they like, what they respond well to, and all those things, and you're starting to put concepts on paper, you will often invite Kevin to, you and Kevin will go to the site together and look at it, right? As you're starting to get a feel for how it's going to come together and to think about feasibility issues and things of that nature.
Yeah, we started doing that at the, I think it was the interim between, like, before the measure, or sometimes we tie it into the measure, and it depends on what's going on and how the scale of it. But it's really, really helpful for, Kev to say, yeah, that wall's not load bearing. You're totally good. Yeah. This is going to be an issue here, so bear that in mind. But we can work with it, and so that, and then we'll send him the plans before we show the clients too, and say, do you see anything that's like wing nutty here?
Wing nutty.
Can this be built?
And Kevin's very honest about those
Oh,
things.
yeah.
But with
Yeah.
usually trying to meet you in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, we could do it this way, like you said before.
Yeah, well, he has a feel for the clients too, because
Right.
we've all had that conversation with each other, and so he understands the direction of what the client's thinking, and kind of the context of the whole design of where their head is and where we're trying to match up to that. So it's nice that you're not just like cold calling, like being brought in. All the conversations have happened, and you're like, so what are we doing?
Yes.
So
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great point that you bring that up, because that is sort of another like unrealized by me anyway benefit to how we work.
yeah,
Right. In that I do have knowledge as to how we got to where we are. So I'm not just coming in blind and like when you're saying, well, what about this one little thing right here? And I don't know all the backstory on how we got there. And so that is a nice thing. And it's something we really didn't talk about much in episode 1, is the fact that that we bring the very first meeting we have with the client is where we invite them into our office
yeah,
so we can talk about what it's like to work with us,
yeah,
why we have to have design professionals on board, and all of that stuff, because there's so much information to try and get across to people. And I know that you have the same thing. Like
Yeah.
when you have a design that's done and you're sharing it with the client, there's so many pieces and parts that like about because you created it.
yeah,
But to them looking at it, they see it. It's a beautiful picture. It's a beautiful concept, but they don't understand the intricacies of it, right?
yeah,
And what we found a lot is that you and I on projects and stuff is that, we see those pictures different than our clients do because they don't have the same lens that we do, right? And so they see this beautiful thing. It looks wonderful. We see the detail in there, and I start like
yeah.
figuring out, how do I do that? How much is that going to cost? That's like,
Who's involved?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you see it through your lens and they see it very differently. And oftentimes they don't see the same things that we do.
yeah,
And they don't see the detail in there. And then when they see things happening on their project, they're a little bit like, well, wait a minute. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
I had no idea we were doing that.
yeah,
And when we're like, well, wait a minute, it's like really clear, like here in the drawings, and it's
Yeah.
here in our work, our paperwork that says what we're going to do.
yeah,
And it seems clear to us because we do it all the time.
yeah,
And I think that that's one thing that I have been working more towards, trying to not dumb things down, but slow down and try and explain to people and try and make sure that they understand what it is that we're going to be doing to the best of my ability, so that they're not surprised by that.
yeah,
It still happens. I mean, like on a big complicated project, there's so many moving parts.
yeah,
It's pretty near impossible to communicate everything to somebody and have them fully understand everything that we're going to do.
right,
Some of it is a bit of a surprise when it's happening.
yeah,
And we hope that they're good surprises because they have general ideas to the broad strokes of it, but still it happens. And it always gets me to like stop and think about, how can we do this better? How can we slow down? How can we help explain what it is that we're going to do or what it is that we are doing so that they completely digest it? And the only way we can do that is when we have people like kind of, pulled away from a job site, like in an office space where they don't have like, kids yelling in the background or the doorbell ringing.
yeah, yeah,
Like, dog barking or whatever, that we can all focus on the things that we're doing here. When we don't do that, like if a client lives remote, for example, then it's really hard to convey that information to them and have it all absorbed, because wherever they are and like a Zoom call or whatever, there's chaos happening there or things distracting them.
Or Zoom is just a pain in the butt.
It is.
Yeah.
They can't see the wall that you're referring to.
Right.
They can't picture it in their head.
Exactly. And like
yeah.
my frustration with Zoom is that I see many words that are still being spoken, but I don't hear them because I
Yeah.
started talking, right? And then it blocks out their sound and stuff. And then I'm thinking, well, how much of the stuff that I'm saying are they not hearing?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's probably really profound that
Yeah.
I'm saying.
deeply,
Yeah,
deeply
exactly.
moving is how we is what I
Moving,
would
yeah,
say
thank
it.
you.
Yeah. I often am wiping too.
Right. He did it again.
He did just magic.
Is that crying
every
at
time.
him or yeah.
Because of,
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I the trust the process is like a phrase that I love.
Yeah.
Because we as professionals have developed a process for a reason. We know through the pains of things that don't work. I mean, aren't we always adjusting things?
Constantly.
Like, constantly adjusting for the things that we learn along the
Yep.
way. And so trust is everything.
Mm-hmm.
We trust each other. The client trusts us, or at least we work really, really, really hard
right.
for them to trust us. Eventually,
Right.
they all do, but sometimes it takes longer.
Sure.
But knowing that the process that we have works, and when we veer, things go off the rails. And the process of bringing people in first and meeting with them. I heard somebody kind of poo-pooing this idea on one of the various podcasts I listened to, and I'm like, it works for me, and I know it works for you, because I don't get distracted by the sideshow that's going on in some people's homes, but I'm also not designing their house already when
Right.
I'm
Right.
meeting with them, and I get very distracted by that, because I'm like, gosh, can I just do it now? You know, could you
this
just sit
is
down? I'm going to
awful.
move your furniture, you know, or
Right.
rip that valance down. It's horrible. But you know, getting people in to see that what we're doing is for real. I have a real studio. I have real employees. I have a real process. This is a very big deal. This investment takes time, and there's a reason for it. Here's what we do. Ask me anything. Let's be real, because we're going to get to know each other, whether it's 6 months or 3 years. It's going to be a while. We're
Yeah,
going
right.
to we're going to have to trust each other, and like each other.
Yep.
And
Right. And be there at birthday parties and bar mitzvahs and all
yeah,
that
all
stuff.
the stuff,
Yeah. Right.
you know, and all of that is it needs to be trusted, and that process is there for a reason, and being able to show people what it is that we do is important up front, and it's also important to show them while we're doing it. So I'm reflecting back on the whole Zoom thing, and when we're showing people plans, and they're the people who say that they are visual are the people who are the least visual. And so it's,
Interesting.
you need to show them. And when I started, I was hand drafting and erasing. I mean, back in the day, everything was just 2-dimensional, which I loved the process of. And it's shocking that that was just what people did. But now that we have the evolution of, we can show you upside down, we can show you everything. And still it can get lost in translation. So articulating it, having visuals, having a process, having trust, all of these things count toward the product, you know, and making sure
Right.
that people get what they're hoping for.
Yeah, that trust thing it's such an immeasurable and difficult thing to quantify. For example, there's a phase during the construction project where a client thinks that the natural thing to do is to not have the designer around anymore.
Yes.
They're done. The designer is done. And I understand where that comes from, because there was all this investment of time, energy, money, hours and hours of conversation, you trying to elicit all this information from them. You've put it down wonderfully on paper, and they think, well, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
that's a wrap,
Right,
right?
right.
And then now it's time to hand it over to a contractor. So while we were talking about this, the reality that it helps to have us along at the beginning, but we're not doing the heavy lifting. You're doing the heavy lifting. We see it as absolutely essential that we get to the starting point of construction, and that you then take a back seat, but you were there as a support, like we were a support during the beginning phases.
Right.
But that trust it's something that the client can't quite see into the machinations of what's happening there to understand why it's really important that you hang around.
Yeah.
For example, there's so many nuances and complexity when we actually get into the build cycle, where we start to encounter something, we can't do it exactly the way you're saying,
Right.
because we find something.
Right.
But we don't know what into the decisions about why that thing is the way it is. And if we just go ahead and do something, we don't know what we're pulling on.
Yeah, it didn't
right?
happen in a vacuum.
It didn't
Yeah,
happen in a vacuum. In fact, you may have had multiple hours of conversation with the client about this particular thing, and we don't know it. So that critical piece of us coming back to you and saying, this is the scenario we're finding. We're going to have to interact with these materials in this way. What do we need to know?
Yeah.
And sometimes, can you draw that again?
Yeah.
Because in order for us to understand all that's involved back here behind the scenes, we need to have that information. So
Yeah.
that's a kind of a trust back and forth this way, but it's also something that we all get to try to figure out how to communicate to the client as this is actually a value for you, so that the design doesn't fall apart.
Yeah. Well, I think that people also forget, that the clients in particular forget that, or they don't know actually. They don't forget, they don't know how stressful it is to answer all of these questions.
Right.
You know, if we didn't talk about what the reveal should be for the overhang on the countertops, they don't even understand the question a lot,
Right.
or the implications of the answer.
Right.
And then that's not just one question. There's going to be a lot of these. And if we didn't already specify it, there's, you know, we try to specify as much as we can, but
Yes.
imagine being somebody who doesn't have a clue and you're asking this question and this is their dream project and they're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're asking them this question that could kind of screw up their project. That's very stressful. By the way, they have their own lives. You know,
Yes.
they're working or they're
Right.
raising kids or they're doing both, you know, and so they paid us and should keep paying for that little bit of time to make sure that those decisions are made correctly, or at least taking it off of their plate. You know,
Right.
you don't need to be worrying about that. That's our job,
Right.
and we know best how to answer it. You know, we've got a whole quiver full of solutions just based on the experience that we
Yes.
bring with us. So
For sure. So it seems like, Paul, almost every time we've had somebody decide to like say, hey, we're going to leave the designers out of construction, they almost always circle right back.
oh, is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Right.
interesting.
It is.
I wouldn't have known that.
Because like almost immediately they start getting peppered with questions.
Yeah.
And it's like,
It's hard.
and then they go right back
And
to the
it
design
triggers the
professionals,
sort
which is
of
great.
things they realize you're saying, which is we don't know what the implications of the answer we're going to give right now are. And when we sort of have to stumble our way through that, they realize, oh, this isn't the best person to ask about this thing either. Back around.
Yeah.
And which is good.
Yeah.
And we always, always, always incline them that way. No, please do not try to cut the design professional
Yeah.
out of this equation.
Yeah. Well, and it's on a personal level. We birthed that project too. It's very, very personal.
Yes.
I mean, we thought about it in the shower. We thought about it driving. It's always in us and coming out of us. The other day I did something, I stopped what I was doing and opened my laptop and figured something out because I just had to get it out. And that's the kind of stuff that's what goes into it. It's not you're pushing a button or regurgitating a plan that you've done before. Every single one of them, at least in my company, is individual. And we're really thinking about the outcome of that. And, oh, they have 2 kids and I hope that they want to store their things there. You know, it's like we're really thinking about it. And so when you hand off your plans, it's like you're handing off a small chunk of yourself. And for them to say, thanks, see ya, you know, is really hard. And then to come in later and having seen the interpretation of the plan because people made weird decisions or changed things. Like, oh, well, we didn't have the money for that, or they felt it was a better decision to do this. And you see that detail and you're like, well, you can't take pictures of this because that's not good, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really sad because they paid a lot of money for this really thought out design, and it needs to be taken to that next level by the team, the entire team, you know?
Yep, and there's a difference to a degree, well, a pretty significant difference actually between the part of what we do, which is not the interpretation. We're given a set of prints that we're told what to do, and so we're executing that. And what you are doing, which is has an inherent vulnerability to it. This is not taking 10 elements and rearranging them and putting them on different projects. This is you listening to clients, and then out of your own background of cataloged experience and knowledge of some things that might be possible, you're creating a new something on a canvas,
Yeah.
right? It's very personal. So it is like it's a unique thing each time. And that's one of the things that I think that's caused that acrimony in the relationships between design and build is
Yeah.
if you give us well thought out, documented plans and we don't execute that thing that you gave all your energy to, emotional energy, relational energy, and then we just kind of change it a little bit because this seems better to us.
Yeah.
You would
standardize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we get hired to design things that the client wouldn't have dreamt of on their own. I mean, anybody can just do a design and just like paint it white and you're done. But we try to make it interesting. That's why you hire a designer to not only make sure that all the details are taken care of and that it's executed well, but that you get something special and that you get it's for you. And if you can't find it on Pinterest, that's a good thing. That means that we're
Right.
not out on Pinterest going, well, we're going to take that and that and that and that, and ta-da, you look like everybody else.
Right. Everybody
So,
else.
yeah, and it's very, very personal. And we try not to get too hung up on it because it is a business and it is their home. And, you know, we design for their home. Sometimes we go to the mat on certain things that we're like, you got to trust this one. You're going to love this. And other times you just have to let it go. 'Cause they just aren't going
It's
to.
hard, right?
It is hard. There's a lot of tears, little wine. Yeah.
A little wine? Or?
little,
Yeah,
you know.
Okay. That's funny. So, if there was one thing, just one simple thing that you wanted to let clients know before, like, whether it's the first time they meet you or you're just getting started on their project, what would it be?
That's a pretty epic question.
Thank you. Thank you, Arlene.
I think just to kind of just take it down to one little point is that we care. I think that we really, really, really care. And we care about the details. We care about the people that we're working, our team, you know. We care that the client is happy, that every decision that we make is because we care. It's not, we're not thinking, ooh, this could be in a magazine, or ooh, this is the Lord design way of doing things. That's not in our DNA. We truly come to it from a place of wanting to improve people's lives and that we honestly care. And so it's very personal to us. And yeah, it's, you know, we go back to that thing of, you know, trying to make everybody feel at home because we care.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have a Lord signature look that you
Nope.
stamp on every project.
No, it's funny. We get asked that question a lot. So what's your, and I'm like, I don't know. Look at our website. It's a little bit of everything because we reflect back to the client, you know, what they want.
Right.
And yeah, of course it's through our professional filter. And, you know, we bring in certain things. We may talk them out of, you know, geese painted into their tile on the backsplash. Just saying.
So that's not
That's
good.
not a good thing.
Okay. All
That's
right.
not 1990 anymore. But
What about
yeah.
ducks? Or ducks? Okay.
It depends on the ducks and
All
who's
right.
painting them, I guess. But yeah, that we have our common thread, but really from, you know, kind of white, beautiful, airy mid-century vibe to dark and moody textural, crazy lit game rooms. I mean, that's what she wanted. That's what they wanted, you know. So, and we're happy to do it. As long as we have the right team.
Right. Exactly.
No, for sure. No lie about it. Yeah.
Well, you know, when we have clients into our office for the first meeting and they maybe don't have an architect or designer with them. And so Paul and I, during the whole meeting, because it's always the two of us, we're thinking about who's the best fit for them.
Yeah.
And we'll know in talking to them and hearing about what it is that they ultimately want to do with their project. Is it an architect project or is it a designer project? And then the next thing is, who do we think is the best fit for this?
Yeah.
And so people will say to us, okay, great, we need to have a designer and architect. Just give us like 3 or 4 names. And we say, well, no, we're going to give you one name because we're taking our experience and knowledge of industry, these people, their demeanor, their general aesthetic, and their schedules, and saying this is who we think is going to be the best fit for your project. And some people are a little bit taken back by that, but when we explain it, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But we also say, but listen, if you meet with this person and like there's not sparks, right? There's not, you know, it's not magic. There's something about them that you don't like.
Right.
Come back to us and we'll give you a second option.
Yeah.
But we're not going to throw you out to the wolves and be like, here's 3 names, go talk to them.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the knowledge base behind them to help them know what it is that they need to be looking for and asking for.
Right. Yeah.
But we do, and that's part of working with us as a team.
Right.
And the people that we're saying, hey, you need to work with them, we've worked with, or if we haven't worked with them on a project yet, we've spent lots of time building a relationship with them, and then we know that it's going to be a good fit for them.
Yeah. That's pretty magical to be able to do that too, because I think people forget, or they just don't know, that it's really important that we get along,
Right.
that
Yeah.
we respect each
That's
other.
right.
So it's not just finding a contractor that can do the work and a designer that can do the work and throw it in and hope that it all turns out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But really, it matters to us. I mean, this is our business. We need to make sure that, that we're working with people who want to see the whole thing through as well. It's not a transactional thing.
No.
It's very much about relationships. So,
Yeah, definitely is, which always circles back to what we do.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships.
it's not underrated.
Right? No, it's definitely not. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is money.
Yeah,
Oh,
Because
boy,
it
that's
permeates
awesome.
everything we do.
yeah,
And we have this same conversation with everybody in the industry about money. And it's a difficult conversation with people, right? It's very emotional. And a lot of people in our industry tend to take the path of, ooh, that's hard to talk about money and it's hard to be real with what things cost. So we're going to not talk about it, or we're going to tell you what you want to hear.
yeah.
And then later we'll reveal to you what it really costs, mostly in the way of change orders or cost overruns or whatever the case may be. And I would say that we lose some opportunities because we're very upfront with what we expect things are going to cost.
Yeah.
And we would rather lose that opportunity
Yep.
than to get into something and then reveal the reality of it and then have this ugly relationship for 6, 8, 9, 10, 2, 3 years, whatever it is. We don't want that, right? We don't want for everybody that works around us and with us to be in that misery with us.
Yeah.
In my career, I've had clients, situations like that, right? In the past where it was miserable from start to finish, and it would be a 1 or a 2 year project. And there was this misery. And I think about how many years were taken off of my life.
Totally.
And those people around me, right?
Yeah.
Kids, spouse, loved ones, whatever, because when you're in that ugly place of misery, like everybody around you gets some of it.
Yep.
And it's not fair for them or anybody else, right? And, remodeling done properly is a very expensive thing. New construction done properly with a mindset of health for the indoor occupants, for the people doing the work, for it to have a 200-year life cycle minimum, it costs more.
Yeah.
It's expensive. But if we're all playing the long game, it pencils out.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't quite think about, or their mindset is a bit different. We have all grown up with the mindset of like, you're going to stay in a house 5-6 years and you're going to move on. You're going to stay here for a little, you're going to move on. The problems that are with this house are somebody else's because you're going to move on. And it's different in other parts of the world where, that mindset's different, where they're like staying in a house forever. And as new branches of that family happen, they come and stay in that house. Maybe you add on to it to accommodate that or whatever, but that place stays within a family. And so it's viewed as a long-term play, and that this house needs to last and it needs to be healthy because we're here forever. And we don't have that here in the United States, but I think that we need to get back to that.
Oh, couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's the best way to build your wealth, right?
Right.
Rather than, selling every 5 years and, you never get to really build up that equity. And
For sure not.
yeah. And also it's just you're making an investment. And yes, what we do costs money for a reason, because we're doing it the right way. And we're the offset of, you're not having to do it yourself. You're not making expensive mistakes yourself.
Right.
You're not living in kind of a half-assed, sort of finished space that you also spent a lot of money on.
Right.
That's why you come to people like us. And like I said earlier, expensive things are expensive for a reason. It's not like any of us is here saying, well, we're just going to spec the most expensive thing and work this angle so it benefits us. It's really about the integrity of the build, and then what's layered on to that build needs to support be as good if, to show it off in its grandeur. Actually, the build sometimes steps back a little bit because it's not the thing you see first, but you feel it, because it's been decorated, then you get to see the detail up close when you're sitting down and you're looking around, you're like, wow, this was done really well. And you notice all the craftsmanship and the detail and the thought, and that comes at a price. It just does.
Yeah.
And you're making an investment. And I'm with you on the stay in your home, make it work well, make it live well, make it be your sanctuary and bring you health and happiness for a really long time.
Right.
Just moving around all the time, stuff is expensive and it's not the best investment. We have clients that have multiple homes, and that's been really cool to work on 3 or 4 homes for people. But oftentimes more now, they're staying where they are, especially people who are empty nesters, but the grandkids are coming, and they thought that they were going to downsize, but now they're just remodeling it to accommodate all the grandkids and themselves and just staying there. We don't want to move. It'll be harder to move. So I love that.
One of the interesting elements that we've become a little bit more bold in our expression about in the first meeting we have with clients is, this is when you're not in the room or no other design professionals in the room, to tell the client, the sooner you can be dead honest with your design team about what your budget is, the better. Now, backtrack a little bit. We in the industry have done not a great job of being honest or transparent or giving numbers that are realistic or things like that. So I understand where the hesitancy to trust from a client comes. But what we're trying to do by the way we're meeting with our clients, and I know you're trying to do the same with your clients, is to try to build the relational rapport so that they understand that we're here because we want to be doing this thing with and for them. And we understand this as a long game and not a short-term investment. This is not to get a few dollars out of this thing so we can move on to the next project.
Right.
This is a much deeper investment. So it's hard to do that quickly because money is so personal. But we're telling them, as fast as possible, tell the design professional what the budget is actually. In your experience, how fast does money come up? Not just for your costs, for doing your thing, but the cost of projects and realistic budgets. How fast does that come up? When you meet with
Almost
people?
immediately.
Yeah.
But the thing is that people don't know.
Yes.
And frankly, I don't know.
Right.
Because I don't know them well enough to know the depth of what it is that they want in that early at first conversation. I can give them through kind of the average of the projects that are similar to what they've done. I can say, your kitchen's going to be 150 baseline. That's what I can tell you with who we work with and what we do. And then I can tell them that, design can be anywhere from 8 to 13% of the cost of the construction of that. That does not include the pretty stuff. That's just the design for the construction. So it's like laying out those realities, and you can see the dollar signs going up, but that's the reality of what we do. And it comes up almost immediately. And people don't understand what all goes into it. So it's just need to keep having the conversation. Sometimes people get it right away and they understand. It's often people who own their own business or are professionals, and they understand that that's the cost of doing business.
Right.
But for people who haven't owned their own business or just aren't familiar with it, it's really hard. And I get that. I do understand that. But we all have businesses to run, and we do this way for a reason, and the costs are what the costs are.
Right.
And I mean, if we could tell all of the potential clients out there something and have them really take it to heart, it's that we do not have a desire to hear the number you're saying and then match that number with what we say the cost is going to be for the project. We're doing some other things. We may be thinking, is this a project that is actually feasible for the dollars they're thinking?
Yeah.
Right.
Or we may be thinking something like, how do we make the dollars that they're expressing go the distance they want it to go and take on a correct amount of scope so that Arlene, for example, doesn't get stuck drawing a whole house when the project is only going to support a kitchen and a primary bathroom.
Yeah.
Right? So we're asking questions for different reasons, and I understand why it's difficult to trust and to put that vulnerable dollar figure out there. The projects, I would say, where we have people who will either say, on this particular project, we just want it the way we want it, and
Right.
we want to see where the numbers fall. So there's this kind of flexibility in it, or we know we have exactly this much. It's really helpful for us to have those guardrails, because then you, from your perspective, can do the best you know how to do to pull the project to that, and we, from our side, can try to meet you up there, and then we have an active conversation about that behind closed doors all the time, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
a big feature of that pre-construction portion of the project.
Well, what I've run into in the past too is when you design, let's say your client says, I've got this certain amount, and you design to that budget, you're editing out stuff all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're like, nope, 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 nope. And it's bitten me before where they're like, well, but I wanted, and I'm like, but that costs more.
Yeah.
Well, but I want to see that, and so it's really, you need to understand that you're making an investment in design up front so that everybody's on the same page when it comes to pricing, and that when the pricing comes in, you can see where if there is some big wacky number somewhere that we need to pull back. It often is, and it's the sum of all the parts. But people see the reality of it. But if you don't give them all of the vision and you funnel it down for them, you've really done a disservice, because they have not seen what is possible. They've seen design to a certain number, and it's not effective for the end goal.
One example of that we came across recently, we've sort of added a step in our pre-construction process to account for some of the difficulty of projecting how much it's going to cost. So on this particular project, the client said to us, we want this really wonderful showpiece of a staircase inside the entry of the house. And the designer, like, okay, I will design that showpiece, right? So we saw it, and our eyes kind of like, this is a showpiece, and this is going to cost. And we didn't really know. Like, we could have guessed that it was going to be in a range, but we would have been wrong in this case.
Yep.
And so we had the trade professional come out there with the drawings, look at the existing conditions, and provide real numbers for us. And then after we'd assembled the numbers for that and other things, we had the client back into the office, and we got to say to them, for example, all right, this beautiful entry piece that you wanted to see a price on is going to be $120,000. And they're like, over my dead body. Like, we were thinking more like 30.
Oh,
and we thought that was,
wow.
We thought that was extending pretty far into it. And so there's a hesitancy back and forth to give numbers, but we found at least that those clarifying conversations where you get to design exactly the way you think it would be perfect for that situation, and then we can recalibrate expectations, and then we can go from there. Sometimes there's no other way into the mess than to do it that way.
Yeah, well, it's just through years of doing this, and I've tried to do things like designing in increments. Like, here's just the design so far. It never ever works, because they need to see the whole vision. Again, they're visual, right? And they need to see all that it could be and understand what all is going into it. And then we can peel things back from there. Like, well, this wasn't important. Maybe we don't need inset cabinets. Maybe we could do full overlay. Maybe we can make it look like inset. There's different things that you can do to achieve that look. But if you don't know what that is, then you can't get there. And that is the initial investment. And then before you are, in demo, what your costs are going to be.
Oh, that just gave me a bad feeling.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's and none of us want people to get into something that they feel uncomfortable with. We
don't.
Humans, that's just not who we are, and it doesn't feel good.
But it doesn't. We get clients that have purchased a house, and they come in and they're like, yeah, we purchased this house. We want to do these things to it. Our realtor told us that should be about $50,000.
Yeah.
How could it possibly cost $600,000?
Yeah.
And we're like, well, unfortunately, your realtor's good at selling houses, but knows nothing about what construction costs and specific to your house, right? And don't forget that your realtor also has a dog in the fight, and they want to sell your house.
Right.
the ugly side of that is that people are making big financial decisions on bad information
Yeah. All the time.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they feel like they're now stuck with this albatross that they can't get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
And they either have to just live with how it is, or try and sell it to somebody else, or maybe stay there and hope that they can make enough money incrementally to do the things that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing applies to us when somebody comes in, they say, hey, we want to do all these things. And we say, well, you would expect to spend about this much money. They may not want to hear it, but at least we're giving them accurate information so that they can make a good decision.
Yeah.
And that's all I want.
Yeah.
Right? I'm happy to not do the project for them, but I don't want them to walk away from their interaction with us with wrong information. Then's going to put them in a place where they're making huge financial decisions that are going to blow up in their face, and they're going to look back and be like, well, those guys said.
Yeah.
Right? I want them to be later like, oh, those guys were right.
Yeah.
That was expensive.
Yeah.
And but there's too many people out there that are willing to tell them what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And they start using that information to, then compare it to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But it's such an interesting selective kind of how we listen at different times. We are so complicated as human beings because if you give them a number that they think is ludicrous, there's often this feeling that, well, that contractor just doesn't want to work with us.
Yeah.
That's the language I hear.
Yeah.
And that is never, ever what we're trying to do.
Right.
Like we would prefer to just say, we don't have time at this point in our life cycle. We would have a next available opening at such and such a time if the way we do things sounds like the right match for you.
Right.
We are never going to give a high number just to walk away from something.
Yeah.
No.
That's not the way it works.
Right. Or if we feel personalities aren't going to align,
Yeah.
I have no problem saying, I just don't think that we're a good fit for this project.
Yeah. That's a hard one. That's a hard conversation because we're people.
Mm-hmm.
And
All of us are. Yeah.
but it's a very fair and honest thing to do because nobody wants to be, even if it's for just 6 months, that's an awful long time.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So
It is a long time. It is.
Yeah. And I was thinking about the lack of information about what things really cost, especially here in Portland. It's expensive to remodel in this area. It just is.
It is.
I mean, especially compared to when you see other shows that are like in Texas somewhere where things cost like $1.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it's a magic land.
Right.
Yeah.
What is this place?
I know, it's like, we are definitely missing something. But I found that like even if I get a phone call for doing a living room, redecorating or refreshing a living room, and nobody ever does that all at once, right? And so, and it's same thing kind of with remodeling. If you're like, I'm fixing the plumbing here and I'm patching the wall there, nobody ever understands all in what something costs. And so when you give the cost of, if you just add up what's in your living room right now that you bought over the last 5-10 years, it's a lot. If you put it in today's dollars, you're looking at $30,000, $50,000, $60,000, depending on what your living room is.
Yeah.
But nobody gets that, But so it's hard to be the bearer of bad news. But it is what it is. Yeah. Window treatments cost money. The installers that make sure that they don't fall down cost money. But people just don't know how much things cost because of a lot of the misinformation out there and the DIY information that's out there that completely discounts the time and the effort and the actual end result. And how they're just kind of making do with something that's kind of crappy because they did it themselves or they just didn't want to invest.
For sure. And there's also people that don't, I think it's funny how people's memories think that something happened just recently and it actually been 5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Because we'll hear that from time to time, like, gosh, 5 years ago we remodeled our kitchen for like $50,000 and that was a lot of money. And it's like, you sure it was only 5 years? And they start thinking about, well, actually, it was actually 15 years ago.
Yeah. And was it a full remodel?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it still is surprising. It's still surprising that, to do a decent kitchen, you're going to start it in $350,000 and move up from there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
We get a bit numb to it
Yeah.
because we deal on that all the time.
Yeah.
But if you're the person writing the check, it's
It's
real.
a big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
And that's why we take so much care.
Right.
We respect that. We know that they're making this huge investment, and then it means a lot to them. We want that check to not be as painful, you know.
For sure. And the same thing for
You only
us.
cry once, hopefully.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But it's the same thing for us that because it costs so much and because it's a lot of money, that we don't want to build in such a way that it's going to fall apart soon, right? Or that there's going to be issues with water intrusion, whatever the case may be. That we've done everything in our power and knowledge to keep that from happening, to protect that investment.
Yeah, well, and the thing that I run into a lot is that people don't understand why we think of all the detail up front and why we give all of the information up front and invest the design time up front to make all those, because that actually saves you money.
Right.
Because if you're stopping the job to make a decision or ordering that thing that hadn't been decided on, that's time and money, and it adds that frustration pile too, because, oh my God, I just want to get in my house. Well, had we done this all at the same time, that decision would be made. Sure, there's other little wonky things and discoveries you make along the way, but really decisions should just all happen up front. If at all possible, that's the way it should be. You can, go a long way with that investment and save a lot of time and tears.
Yeah, we have one project right now that is a sort of fits right along into that category of setting things up correctly up front and then allowing them to run out. And one of the things that we try to do to allow that to happen well is to encourage clients not to do parts of the project themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so
that's really hard.
not to do the paint or not to do the this or that they think they could do okay.
Yeah.
And one of those projects, a client wants to do a certain part of the project, and we let them do that thing. Well, we are now, through no fault of their own, really. It's they're learning as they go, and that's natural to it. But we're rescheduling subcontractors for the third and fourth time, and that wears on everybody
On the team,
in the team, and the dollars run up for our supervision in that way, because we're making all those arrangements and rearrangements and attending the client as they're asking questions and things through the whole process. So there are a lot of reasons that we, like you say, we professionals set things up in certain ways and have our relationships with people we trust, because when it runs smoothly, it's good.
Yeah.
When it doesn't, it can be really bad.
And let's be honest, it's not always smooth. It's
No.
it's almost never smooth. But
Right.
we are able to toggle and to make adjustments because we know who we're dealing with, and everybody wants to accomplish it well. And so you deal with the hiccup. Your clients don't even need to know about it. You just fix it. It's not their worry.
Right.
They paid so that they didn't have to worry about it. I mean,
Yeah, for the most part, they don't know that there's things going on.
yeah.
Because we're all working together to smooth out the ripples.
Yeah, because there are things that are inconsequential to them at that moment anyway.
Right,
And,
exactly.
and unless it's a decision that's like, okay, this is going to be structural change, financial change. If it's just working out a wonky thing, they don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're at the end of our time.
Oh, I was just getting warmed up.
I know.
See?
Exactly. But thank you for joining us, Arlene.
Well,
It's
thank
been
you.
great.
Thanks for doing what you do. We really appreciate you. And, we're lucky to have you. Very, very lucky. And thank you for having us part of
likewise.
your team.
Thank you for joining us on our episode today. We had a lot of fun talking with our guests. We really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be looking forward to you when our next content comes out.